let me just say this about Roger Brown. If Rick Barry, whose number was just retired with the Golden State Warriors last week, if Rick Barry's one of the all-time greats and in the Hall of Fame, Roger Brown should be too. Because in the 72 series, when Rick Barry was really in his prime with the New York Nets, Roger Brown totally dominated him in the series.
I think Roger, and if you're watching Raj, I hate to say this, but Roger was probably one of the finest basketball players ever played the game. And I mean ever play the game. One-on-one, I don't think that he has an equal, period, in the hit Michael Jordan or anybody. Roger Brown one-on-one was the finest I've ever seen.
You know, a player like myself who was basically considered a one-on-one player has to have the ball in order to do his thing. So without it coming off the boards and without it going into Mel's or Bob Nedelecki's hands or George or Darnell's hands, of course I couldn't have the ball. And the ball has to be fed to me by a guard. And you have Freddie Lewis and Billy Keller and Donnie Freeman. So, you know, a lot of the credit for my success, you know, has to go to the other players.
Describe Mel Daniels as a ball player.
Well, Mel's rebounding ability was outstanding, and I don't think he really got the credit for it. He had a tremendous jump shot, a turnaround jump shot, and a decent hook shot, but he would protect you. He would protect his teammates. In other words, if a player got by me, you could always depend on Mel to leave his man and attempt to stop your man.
Mel was a real worker. He played extremely hard and got a lot out of his ability because, you know, he worked hard and he was just unrelenting. A great rebounder and a great guy to play with.
Mel was probably the best center in the ABA, and I would say, counting Wilt Chamberlain and all those guys, he was in the top 5 in the pro basketball. He could shoot, he could play defense, he could pass. He was just a great all-around player, and you know, a lot of people gave a lot of other guys credit, but the main ingredients for our basketball team being a great basketball team was Mel Daniels.
I don't think that they could have got anyone better to come into the Indiana Pacers organization to do the job that Mel Daniels did. Mel was 6'9" tall. Today, the centers are anywhere from 7 foot up. And Mel he held his own. He did super work. He worked hard. He was a worker in practice and in the games. And he was very successful, and he knew that I was one that was always behind him and with him on anything he wanted to do. And all his accomplishments, he should have got. He just didn't get enough of them.
Mel was an extremely intense player. Mel was tough. Mel was mean. Mel made it all work, and Mel was kind of the glue that we needed to pull our team together. He was a great rebounder. I don't think people really realize how good a rebounder he was. When that ball went on the glass, he went after it. He'd knock people down, throw them on the floor. He'd do anything he could to get a rebound. Plus he was a great guy. He was one of actually our whole team that one year was just fantastic guys. But Mel was a great guy. We all liked each other, and Mel was just an intense competitor.
As I look at those players, I look at a Mel Daniels, and I see today some of the centers that are playing and doing very well in the NBA. Mel Daniels wouldn't have had any problem at all.
We played as a unit. Each guy nowadays is a corporation. Everybody's worried about their corporation. We played not for the money because the money was there. It was there, but you know, not like it is now. We played because we loved the game, and we loved one another. I mean, it wasn't anything that we didn't do on the court that we didn't do off the court. I mean, we partied together, we cried together, we did everything together. And I'm talking about each guy that came to the Indiana Pacers kind of fell into the groove with us because they knew what to expect. That we were winners. We took everything serious. I mean, when we went on the court, it was all business. And I think that's how we approached it here. And I don't think it's being approached that way now. I think it's too many eyes in the situation now. There's too many me's. You know, it's not we.
The true meaning of Pacer pride.
The true meaning of Pacer pride. I don't think these guys understand it. I don't think they understand feeling, not only among the ball players and among the coaches and then, but among in the community. This is a basketball state, and they accepted the professional end as well as they did the high school end. And until these guys feel that the past, I mean, the tradition that we set down, and they're a part of that tradition, I don't think we're going to get a whole lot done. And they got to cut out the eyes and me, that just don't work.
Describe for me Bobby Leonard as a coach. Was he a tactician, a cheerleader, or a mix of both?
I would say that Leonard was more the cheerleader, the enthusiastic coach, the hollering and screaming type coach. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I think Slick was just very enthusiastic with his personality, with his coaching, and that's the way he approached it.
He was never afraid to take chances. There's an old saying that, you're down by 2 points and you have the basketball and you're on the road. Well, the average coach would probably play for the tie. Slick was very daring, and he would go for the three, and he would go for the juggler.
He would get on guys in practice. I mean, he would get on them to the fact that he would put us out of practice. We'd almost get in fights in practice. He'd just make us go at it, but then he would sit back in the corner. He would laugh. He'd say, "Now I got him exactly feeling the way I want him to feel in order for him to go out and play a great game." And this is what he wanted out of us. He wanted the best out of us. He knew our ability. He knew what we could do. And this is what he wanted to bring out every night, and he was very successful. I have to give him all the credit in the world for us being the champions like we were.
This man had a knack of getting down to your soul when it was time to get down to your soul. When the time was critical, he would always come up with a new, innovative form of motivating the players. He just had a way of getting to you, and he'd get you mad at him, but you'd end up being mad at yourself, and you'd end up being mad at the opponent after he got through with you. So, and obviously it worked out because we've got 3 championship rings to show for it.
He clears down under. Raj clears down under. Slim looks at him, turns around. George, you're going in to set the pick. You're moving. George is going in to set the pick. Roger faking like you're coming over and double him back underneath. You got him? Go out for Roger. Go down Roger's side. Here, look here. Line Raj up on the other side of the floor. And then bring it across the top. Watch your pass across the top. Let's go to the hoop. Now we got 1 team foul. How many fouls Billy got? Let's bring it down this side here. Ollie. Stay up, get your hands up, Art. Now let's move that ball and hit that open man. Now go for Freddie. Hurry up. You know when they drive, they're looking to hit the guy going into the hoop on block and fade. Now let's get her going. Come on, baby. Let's really get tough now. Let's Let's take it into the basket. 3 teamers apiece. Let's take it inside and go to the hoop now. The bank off the board and off the rim. Yes, sir. John knows. Hit the board. No, it didn't hit the board and the rim. Billy, come. Run your clock down. We got 30 more. Put it in it. Get the floor drops right. 30 seconds. Run it all the way down. Go pick for Roger. You wake, Roger.
Some coaches feel that they can't be a part of the team, and that's their style. And I'm not knocking anyone's style, but Slick was a part of our basketball. He was a part of what we felt. He was a part of what we did. He was the type of coach that would come in at halftime and change the whole offense. So that offense is not working, we'll do something else. And put in 5 or 6 brand new plays, and we'd execute that. He's the type of guy that if he knew that you were dragging a little bit, he wasn't afraid to pick up a hockey stick and threaten your life.
He'd take a club and chase you around the locker room, and then 20 minutes later we'd be out having a beer together. We would would sit out, he would tell me, we'd be in a bar having a drink or something, he'd say, I don't care what happens to you tonight, as long as when you're on that floor, give me 100%, run through the wall for me. He says, I'll do anything for you. But he expected 100% of you on the floor, and then off the floor, it was just like, he was like a father figure to almost all of us.
The players developed a confidence not only in ourselves, but in Slick, because we saw these things being diagrammed at timeouts and actually taking place, developing exactly like he said they would. And we got great results from that.
I was one of those guys, when I walked on the floor, I wanted to beat the other coach, the other team, the referees, everybody in the place.
George McGinnis, your thoughts about George McGinnis?
Had tremendous talent, physical talent. There's nobody that size with that kind of quickness in that league. He was 6'8", and he weighed 225, and he was quick with it. That was the key to his success, his body. He was so quick, and he had good skills with that too. And you just tell George McGinnis was going to be a great player in either league.
I watched George when he was at Washington High School in Indianapolis, and I couldn't believe he was like a man playing with some young kids. His talent, his body, and his ability was far above anyone that he could play against. I think George was ready for the pros when he was in high school. He was a 6'8", 235, 240-pound kid with a lot of speed and quickness that they just wasn't ready for when he came to the ABA. Now, when we got George added an awful lot to our team.
I can remember telling Sports Illustrated, I thought at the time when they wrote to see George, he was the best forward in the game. The guy could do it all. And I've seen him do things that I tell people about, just still to this day amaze me. For a man with his body and his size, he was 6'8", 240, and he was, the guy could run faster than the guard, jump higher than most guys, do everything. He was just a fantastic basketball player.
One thing I remember about George McGinnis is the one-handed pump shot, and fundamentally it didn't look too good, but for you it worked. Is that something that somebody taught you?
I really don't know. I go back and I looked at high school films of myself in 1969, and I shot basically a one-handed shot, like a push shot. And, I certainly didn't recommend that type of shooting to anyone else. But I think that, if you're successful at something, then you don't have to be traditional. There's nothing that says that just because this is the way everybody else does something, you should do it. I think the most important thing is what you do, what type of results do you have, and if you can be consistent and with your style, then there's no need to change it. Nobody really ever tried to change it.
What comes to mind when you think of Freddie Lewis as a ball player?
Mr. Confidence. I think there was never a time when Freddie couldn't get the job done in his mind. He knew that the first shot of every game was going to be his, and whenever we needed a bucket at the end of the game, he knew he could make it. And I think that confidence rubbed off on other players.
Probably the best point guard that has ever played for the Indiana Pacers. He did everything. He could play defense, he could shoot it, he could run, he could handle a break. He had the greatest talent for getting the big man in the game there ever was, because he understood what most point guards don't understand, that if your big man aren't working for you, you're going to have a tough night. So Freddie saw to it that I had the ball early, that Neto had the ball early, and he knew that Roger would get it anytime he wanted. So he kept us in the game by getting the ball and patting us, way to go, big guy. He kept us pumped up. So he did a great psych job on us, He was an extension of Slick, and it was great.
We had some great years, and I look back at some of those players, and I look at a Freddie Lewis, and I look at the guards today. Freddie Lewis on a basketball floor was a true leader. He led the ball club, and he got the ball to the people. He sacrificed. He did all the things that today what they call a point guard. He was an excellent defensive player, passer. He could score. He could play the game of basketball.
He was probably one of the most underrated players that's ever put on a Pacer uniform. Extremely smart. Knew how to keep everyone within that team happy, meaning that if there was one guy felt like, hey, I'm being ignored a little bit offensively, he would make sure that that guy got the ball to keep him satisfied. And he just knew how to handle. He knew how to handle the players. He knew what to say to you. And he was another guy who was a big